Hey everybody, it is Wintermute. I'm going to do a quick, another video about some play aids that I've recently added to my collection, which I think help with ease of play and just referencing stuff. So one of the things I did is, now I really liked MemoG's reference sheets, and I used some of them. I did not use his IPP tracker. I really didn't have a good way to print it out. But what I did is I took what I could from it and used it on my board. So you'll see I had talked about making a card down here that kind of showed where everybody starts and what their wartime economy is. Well, he had a good idea of actually putting like a banner up here for most of the nations about where they started, and then where their wartime economy was. And then, here there's just a roundel here, a small roundel showing that's where Japan starts. After that, you just move it like normal. And then it's much easier and quicker to just kind of look at and say, all right, well, that nation starts here and they want to end up, here. Okay, great. So I like this a lot. I like this a lot. And there's a couple little bit that's covered up there just because of the nature of the size of the board versus the roundels themselves. Another thing that I did is I went ahead and I added, he had a marker here at 15, 35, and 51. And those are the IPP breaking points for when America can start taking additional actions. And so again, that's just a quick reminder for everybody to look at to quickly know where those breakpoints are at. And if you're curious about what those actual mean, I put the United States income determined actions chart down here just for, quick reference for everybody. Because I definitely know that's one of those ones that I see people having to dive back into their reference sheet a lot about. So I figured, okay, let's take it up here, put it on the board, everybody can see it, including the American player, quick reference, no problem, move on. I did not add the expansions to this. I don't generally play with expansions at this point. That might change in the future, but you can see I've got the Canada and Turkey roundels over here. They're not really worth putting on the board, especially in the case of Turkey, because you don't know exactly where its IPPs are going to be at when they come in, or they may change really quickly, depending on how that all kind of works out. So I'm really happy with this. I think this will work out really well. I definitely would add other more information to it, but obviously I don't want it to become too crowded and confusing to look at. Here I think it still works really well. Then I added, so I own the Spanish Civil War and Latin America at war. So here's the Spanish Civil War events, here's the Latin America war events, real easy. And as the Spanish Civil War events get used up, because they don't repeat, you can just cover that number with a roundel and, ignore that roll. So that's nice to be able to look at, real quick reference. And again, everybody can look at it. They don't have to hunt down the sheet. It's there, easy to look at. Same thing with the Latin America at war. And then here's just a couple core charts or rules from the book that I felt were worth putting up here, because they tend to be the ones that I see people diving back into the book a lot for. Strategic rail capacity. That's one that people have to look up a lot. I went ahead and added, just for being a completionist, I went ahead and I added the shore bombardment chart here, and then the strategic movement limits here, assuming you're playing with that optional rule, which I think you should at the very least. Quick convoy rating rules, and here's the convoy rater chart. Now this has to get looked up all the time. I see players doing that all the time. So I went ahead and added that. I added a little bit of blurb about submarines. Blitz requirements, so you don't have to dive back into the book to double check. Strategic bombing sequence, interception, combat, and damage for the planes that can do it. And then variable end, which I know is a popular optional rule. I went ahead and just added that. Special fortification zones. Again, that's another one that I see people looking up quite a bit. And just in my experience. And then back to the United States income determined actions. Put it, anything I can get up here that I see people looking up a lot, I will do. So I may add to these, I may reorganize these. This was kind of real quick cut and paste thing using GIMP, which is a editing program that I really like to use. But it's, it was a quick and dirty job. It doesn't look great, but it gets the job done right now. I might take time later to kind of make it look a little nicer. But right now, like I said, I'm happy with it. And then tech roles. This is just a quick way of tracking who has how many tech roles for the various nations. And I got this idea in part from playing on Tabletop Simulator, where you can't look at the board very quickly and take it all in. And when I was playing America, I was constantly having to recount the number of factories I had built or upgraded, because I would do like at least one or two at some point during the game, but I would forget whether, okay, was this the turn that I upgraded that, or was it last turn, or was I going to do it next turn? Okay, well, how many dice do I get this turn? I found it was easy to lose track of. And, you know, it's just another way that you don't have to look at the board and spend time counting. You just look up here. So again, it's not everybody needs to turn around and look at the board and kind of calculate it all every time they want to roll. They just keep track of it up here, and that'll make it I think that'll make things run a little smoother. And then on the tech chart, another thing that I know people constantly are looking up when you play America and Russia are what the techs are for their victory condition. So all I did was make tiny little roundels for America and Russia up here. So those players can just look at the board, and when they're figuring out what they want to roll for, they can just really quickly go, okay, well, oh yeah, that's right, strategic rockets, that's mine. I want that as America. So you know what? I got an extra die I don't need for the important stuff. I'm going to go ahead and roll on that. You know, just quick reference stuff. And then the other players can know it too. They don't have to ask to see your reference sheet for those two nations. They can just glance over here at the board and at the same time see how far along the track you are. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with everything I added up here so far. And then another thing that I did was, well, let me show you some of the stuff. One thing I did is I had all my extra tokens and chits and things like that in a tray like this. Now this is primarily how I'm going to store it when I want to put it away. But when I'm expecting to play and I'm going to take it out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these to keep them on the edge of the board. So when you're going through your turn, you can kind of just go, okay, well, I know I'm going to be doing some stuff up here. So I'll stick that there because I know I'm going to be swapping out chits as I go. I know I'm going to be putting down some combats this turn. And I use these to represent where every territory that has a combat going on in it. You know, just as a way of kind of reaching down here at the edge of the board. That the tackle box that I was using is it's just too bulky. So it intrudes onto this. Now you got a little bit of space here, and a little bit of space here, and a little bit of space, well, a little more space over here to kind of sit stuff like that. But even over here, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Japan's going to come down here and take this stuff, or even come out here and take Samoa and Gambier and Gilbert Island. So I don't like to cover, I like to avoid covering as little of the map as possible for that reason. Now, the whole Antarctica thing is usually a dead zone, so I'm less worried about that. And one of the ways that I use it, here's my poker chips that I use for IPP. So I just keep a stack of each denomination here, 1s, 3s, 5s, and 10s, so I can just swap them out. So I don't got to turn around and go into my poker chip box here every time I want to do that. And these are my movement remaining roundels. I printed these out and then found some wooden chips at Michael's or Hobby Lobby. I laminated the markers, printed them out, glued them onto either side. So as you move if you've got several aircraft coming from several different locations, it's in one fight, you can easily keep track of, okay, well, those two have 1 point left, and that one actually has 4 points left, and just kind of, you know, keep track of that as you go. So I really like those, and I like having them out on the board so I don't got to go dig for them as I'm playing the game. And these are silicone cupcake wrappers. So if you don't want to use the paper ones and you want to kind of, you know, keep using these over and over to make cupcakes, that's what they're for. But I have also seen a lot of players use these in other board games to hold various tokens and chips like I am right now. And they're nice and easy to keep on the edge of the board. I know there are better options that will look more professional than these pastel colors for like metal tins that fit this bill. I haven't found any that I'm happy with yet. But I do want to replace these with something nicer looking, with like maybe a stainless steel look. Rather than these, but these work great for now because I actually like to keep these on hand for when I pull a board game out and there's a lot of tokens in this particular board game. I just pull these out and I kind of sort them out as we're playing the game, you know, right before we're setting up the game. But in this instance, this is the game that I'm primarily playing. So These work great. You need militia, I've got militia. I've got supply tokens. I've got your battle markers. I've got this. And if you know you're going to be dealing with a lot of other tokens from that where you store them, pull out a small handful, grab an empty one, throw them in there, and put it here on the edge of the board, depending on how you play. So I'm pretty happy with that so far. One thing I do is I try to keep this area open, not just because this is where I tend to record and I want to sit, and I'll actually eat on this. This is in my dining room. I'll actually eat on this. This is a very durable mat. I haven't, the only issues I've had is I've got a couple scratches on it from pulling stuff over it that I should have been more careful about. Lesson learned. But we're talking really small stuff. Like I don't even know if you can see, you can kind of see that one right there right next to Japan. And I got a little bit of paint right there from some British ships that were still a little wet. Not that big of a deal. Really not that big of a deal. I've seen gaming boards way worse. I've played on gaming boards way worse shape than this, so not too worried about it. Another thing that these are handy for is if you're playing with an expansion, like if you're playing with the Dutch expansion, you just take all the Dutch on here. So with these, I can pull these out when I'm playing that turn for that nation, sit it up on here, open it up, and I've got all my units. I've got access to all my units. But you don't want to, you don't want to do that for all those expansion nations, because sometimes it's just a pain in the butt, because I don't keep them all, and Turkey can go with any nation, really. They can go to the Comintern, the Axis, or the Allies. So I could keep it in the Italian box, or I could keep it in the French box, or I could keep it in the Comintern box. But I actually have a toolbox that I keep all my expansions in. So when I want to actually play it, or I'm expecting to play it, I'll do this instead. I'll just pull out all the tokens, all this, and then you could just sit it on the board, next to whichever player actually gets control of Turkey. And that brings me to my other things, and I've pointed these out before, and I like them because it helps break things up. The thing that with the build chart is sometimes it's easy to forget that you have stuff on there for starters. I mean, I've seen that happen quite a bit, because it sits down on that end of the table, and then you put the stuff you're building on it, and then you kind of forget it's there because you had a really busy turn with waiting, it took a while to get back to your turn, or it's you wait a week in between turns, depending on how you play the game, and you come back and you forget it's over there. Well, this is a lot easier to remember. And anybody can look at that card from a distance and see Great Britain clearly has those units on it. It's easier to distinguish them rather than kind of have them all eating up space if there's a lot of them in the particular build boxes. So I like that this kind of spreads it out a little bit. And another part of this is, so for the same reason I use these and don't want to constantly have to go into that box to get stuff every time I want to swap out shit, so I'll keep them here. I also keep roundels here, control roundels for the various nations right next to their cards. And then anything that is expansion related, I do the same thing as well. So you can see the Canadian tokens here. You can see the Canadian corvettes here. And then there's the Canadian specialty units here. Now I am going to make an actual Canadian build chart, which is what this is for. But I'm having trouble with my printer right now. Otherwise I would have done that like right before I made this video. So I'm going to make one for Canada, and I'm going to make one for Turkey. Once I get my printer fixed. So that'll move up to the Canadian one. And obviously I like to put these at the bottom of the board so they take up less space. And in theory, if you have less space than I do, you could always just roll the FEC and ANZAC into the Great Britain one and the Canadian one into the Great Britain one. So you could even just roll France into Great Britain if you want, or you could just do Axis, Allies, and then Comintern if you really don't want to eat up a lot of space with this stuff. But I like to have it a little more spread out, a little more clear cut, a little easier to see. So here's Germany. Here's the nationalist forces that they can build. If you're playing with the Spanish expansion, or Civil War expansion, here's the tokens for that. There's a couple more tokens for that. Here are if you're playing with Latin War in America, Germany's the only one that can build these towers down there, so they go right next to their build card. And then these are their IPCs that they collected at the end of the turn. So again, any player can kind of look over here. All right, there's the German card. There's their stack, and have a pretty good idea pretty quickly about how much money they have just by looking at the tokens. And I'll tell you what, I love these poker chips compared to paper money. These poker chips are so much easier to work with. They're more durable. It's nice to put your unit out and just sit it on top to kind of keep track of what you're building as you're doing your math. Other players can simply look at your stack real quick and count it up. They don't got to bother you. Real easy stuff. Real easy stuff. Yeah, that should be there. So yeah, that's the south end of my board. And then, like I said, I've got a build card for the FEC, build card for the Anzac, and then over here is Japan. And then, kind of like with everything else, I've got the kamikaze tokens here. Now they're face down because they're not usable yet. When they become usable, I will flip them all face up, and then as I use them, I will actually take the token and put it back in the box where I store them to show that I'm going to eventually run out of those ability to use those kamikazes. And then anything off to the north is going to be stuff that is not on the chart yet, but is triggered to be put on the chart. In this case, we have those 3 light carriers that Japan has. And then there's the USA, KMT. If you're playing with the KMT expansion, just like the others, here's the Flying Tiger token. Here's the units that they can upgrade into, or here's the CEF that they can lend to FEC, and here's their elite units. And then you see that up here too. Here's the stuff for the Spanish Civil War. Here's the Soviet Volunteer Guard for the air units. I believe that's what it's called. And then, for the, here's the Spanish Nationalists, all nice and neat. So you just pull out a couple tokens as you build them or lend lease them, and it all kind of stays together with the player that's going to control it. So I find all this to be very nice and organized. This helps me. This helps me play the game quicker, helps me keep focused on what I'm trying to do, and go through my turn. And the last thing that I'm going to show off is, if you're like me, the expansions, the way they format the expansions are fine. They definitely do it in a way that is very beautiful. It spaces it out, lots of artwork, lots of kind of flavor text and explaining what the background is. But when I'm actually playing the game, I don't want to have to sift through that stuff. It's perfectly fine to do it that way. But for me, I want to kind of cut to the chase and get the information I need and move on playing the game. So to that end, I've shown off these reference sheets that I've made about various specific things in the game. Well, I basically took that same concept and applied it to the expansions. So here, this is the Spanish Civil War expansion. There's all the rules for it, everything. I did not bother transferring over anything that was descriptive about the history. All of this is mostly just cut and paste. There were a couple, and I did not want to mess with the wording at all with these. I wanted to literally be cut and paste and then format it in a way that looked nice and was easy to kind of pick out and see, and that's it. Now, there were a couple places where, like for example here, you see I didn't have a whole lot of room left, so I couldn't really fit a Spanish Civil War title up here at the top. And I color-coded them kind of with because every expansion kind of has a color scheme to it. So I tried to stick with that a little bit, so it would stand out from the others, where others I had space to work with, like the China at War one, so I went ahead and titled it China at War. But in this case, I did mess with the wording a little bit, and I specifically remember what I did with this one, when you look at, where was it? Supply markers. At the beginning of supply markers, there is kind of a long, almost 3-sentence description of what supply markers are, and that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't tell me what they do. And when I'm coming to see what they do, I cut straight to the chase. So I took those sentences out and I just tossed them. So those are the only changes I would make to the wording, except for a couple cases to make sure that because I didn't want to make the font too small that it was difficult to read. So there were some choices that I made where it's like, okay, we don't really, see, here it actually says Spanish Civil War. Well, let's break that down so it just says SCW. And that kind of, condensed some of the writing and then allowed me to move it up another line, which let a lot of this work. Otherwise, I would have had to make this font a lot smaller, and that, you don't want to make it too small because then it becomes difficult to read, especially if you've got bad eyesight. I want these to be easy to use in a way that, okay, we're playing the Spanish Civil War, you grab this, here's all the rules. If you want the fluff about the history, pull out the actual expansion sheets and read that. But if you just want to play with it and you just care about how the rules work and you don't want 20 pages to have to sort through every time you've got a rules question, that's what this is for. So I did the exact same thing with the China at War. Now this one I tried to do something a little different. I tried to color code some of the text as it relates to whatever nation you're talking about. So if it's black, it kind of relates to everybody, and every time it specifically mentions the CCP, KMT, or USSR, those are color coded for their respective nations. And then I would make territorial names bold type so that they stood out. So it was easy to, okay, place one opium mark, okay, Afghanistan, okay, those three. And it was, you put one out, you put the other one out. Oh, what was that third one? You look back, it stands out a little bit better when it's boldface like that. So in some places where it's mentioned a specific land zone name, that's what I would do. I would boldface it. And then here, the CCP stuff is all red. Anything Soviet Union related is kind of that maroon color. German support one, even though it kind of involves Germany, it's really a KMT ability. And the supply marker is for all the nations, so I just left it black. I don't know how I feel about that color coding yet, but it was just an idea I had. And then again down here, outside attacks, every time it mentions CCP or KMT, I color coded it, and then same thing here with this. I might go back and redo that with the other ones. I kind of want to wait for player feedback if anybody uses these and they have an opinion either way. And then same thing with the Latin America at War. Now this one I went ahead and I just did the alternative setups. I printed out this page and just put it on the back because I was able to get all the important rule stuff on the front, including the charts down here at the bottom. So you shouldn't have to, if you're going to play this expansion, you just pull this out and you can set it up and you can look at all the charts. You shouldn't have to go back and pull out the 12, 15 pages that you would print off that look really nice and beautifully formatted with all that extra artwork and all the history. But if you don't want that, this kit's rid of it. Turkey, same thing. Turkey was pretty straightforward. So in this case, all I had was, here's the reference sheet. Actually, that is the old reference sheet. I just realized I accidentally grabbed the old reference sheet. I believe there's a new one. I need to print that out and redo this one. But anyway, then, here's how influence work, revised Turkish setup, fifth column, Transcaucasia, Greece, how all this works, just the rules. Canada at War actually took a little bit more space because the Devil's Brigade, their special rules were quite extensive. So they ate up a lot of space. And then really each of these units, you have to make sure that these rules are followed because they're very particular. So in this case, I ended up doing just the Canada at War with the, so here's all the main rules from the very front. Here's the special units on the back. And then here's the actual Canadian reference sheet, front and back. And I don't usually print out with these reference sheets, all of them, I don't print out the unit build charts because I have a single sheet that already covers that. If you'll remember, I have like this sheet that covers the land units, and then I have the other sheet that has the air units on the one side and the naval units on the back. So other than these special units kind of being repeated here, although Devil's Brigade is so extensive in its special rules, I went ahead and wanted to make sure that they were clearly stated on this sheet. It's just how Canada worked out. And then the last one that I worked on was, this is the colonial infantry expansion. And it has a reference sheet you can print out, but it's like 5 pages long. And again, I don't want a ton of pages to have to sort through. So I shrunk everything down, altered the font a little, went into the worksheet program, and front and back, everything's color coded. Here's your French, your American, your Russian, Italian, Japanese and German, FEC, and Britain. And the important thing with this one is you want to be able to look at find these roundels really quickly on this sheet, because that's how you're going to identify especially because those units can come onto the board and then move around. Well, if you move a unit that was built in Rhodesia all the way up to Eastern Egypt, and then maybe even further away from that, you forget okay, well, wait, which one was that? Oh, I got to look up that symbol real quick. Oh, that's that. Oh, that's that one right there. Okay. So I wanted to make sure that this still had the pictures of the actual roundels on it. And then a real quick, just like they have in the core rules, a breakdown of how how their special abilities work. And then the actual, now the font on this I had to make a lot smaller than I would have liked, but it was the only way I was going to make the rest of this work on just 2 pages, front and back. If I made it any bigger, it would constantly push this last row down into a new page, and I wanted to keep it on just this one sheet as best I could. Now at this point, I'm only doing this with expansions that 1, I own, or 2, I plan on playing with. And so at this point, I'm going to take these and I'm going to put these on my MediaFire account, and I will put them I will put the link below in the description. So if anybody else wants to kind of go download these to use them, I will do that. I will make that option available. I also have these sheets that I made for these. I also have these on there. So if you wanted to use something like this, that I would let you print that off, no problem. Also, just to clarify if there's a question, I do not like that brand new FEC roundel. The light blue inside the dark blue, I hate that roundel. And I'm still using the old Union Jack roundels because I think it looks so much better. I don't like the color scheme. And I'm sure that the roundel that they replaced this one with is more historically accurate. That's fine. I'm just having a mental block using it because I just don't like it. I just don't like it. I'll color code this to that. I will sort of. I might end up, but I really don't even paint my FEC units a different color because right now there's no reason to. They don't surrender unless Britain surrenders. So they all move in the same turn. Any specialty units they build are already marked as specialty units, and there's no reason that those specialty units, there's no restrictions on them moving outside of that theater, say over here to Africa. So I just keep it all beige. The only issue I ran into is I did the same thing with Australia. I made all their stuff beige. And I didn't realize when I did that Australia has separate surrender rules. So that might be an issue that I have to address at some point. I might need to recolor all this stuff to ANZAC. I may need to figure out a way of putting ANZAC flags on it with water transfers or something like that. But I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But otherwise, so I've got these sheets. I've got all the reference sheets that, now I don't have the ones Memo G did. I didn't put them in my MediaFire. They're his. Go to his website to get them. But the ones that I made are all up there. So the victory conditions, everybody's victory point total sheet is up there, and the tech reference sheet is all up there, and so will these. I'm going to put these in a different folder, and I'm going to call them the condensed expansion rule sheets. And then that way anybody can download them and do what they want with them. And if you do download them and start using them and you find a typo, an error, something that needs to be cleaned up or corrected, please let me know so I can do that so that I don't, make a mistake. Now, most of this was just cut and paste. So other than a couple, like I said, some editing things to shrink this down, I didn't touch the rules at all. I wanted to make sure everything was as clear as it was. So I left everything as absolutely, I'd say about 98% of it is the exact same text right from the thing. And most of what I cut out was just superfluous descriptive text, or I had to shrink a couple things down, but it should all still be worded exactly the same. So yeah, like I said, give me some feedback on if you use these, if there's any issues, if anybody else has any sort of play aids that they've come up with that they think help out with the game. Go ahead and post them in the comments below. And for right now, this is Wintermute signing off.